What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing CV boots on a 07 WRX. It's a pretty common problem, whether it cracks right there or you pinch it and it starts spreading grease all over your wheels and tires like that. So today I'm going to show you how to fix that, so stay tuned. But first off, we're going to go through the tool list of stuff you're going to need to do this. So first and foremost, brake clean's always handy. Impact if you've got one. If not, I'll show you what you can do. This is just for special lug nut for her lugs. Got multiple sizes of ratchets. You're gonna need a 12mm, a 19. I just got a longer 19, and then a 32mm. And I also got another impact. This tool, I'll show you what that is for later. You don't need one, but brass hammer, normal hammer, some punches, a marker. I'll show you what that's for later. It's always nice to have a light, some rags, and then some gloves because it can get pretty messy. The kit we got is just from Napa. So you got your CV boot. It comes with a bull ring, a big thing of grease, and then here's our clamps. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is take off the wheel. Now after you get the wheel off, set that to the side. And as you can see, I'll show you this. It's put grease all over the wheel, so that's definitely a problem. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our 12mm and we're going to take off our brake line on this side, and then we're also going to take off the ABS sensor. We just don't want to nick those while we're doing this. Kind of tuck those out of the way the best you can. And then as you can see here, we've got this 32mm nut, and what that does is that holds the whole assembly on. So you got this 32mm nut, and if you can see that, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a little keyway, and then it looks like somebody took a punch and then it folds into the keyway. So what we want to do is take a punch like that, and we want to unfold it out of the keyway. So now the nut's going to come off a lot easier. So now if you don't have an impact to take this 32mm nut off, what you can do is you can grab your wheel and you can pop your center cap out, put it back on the car, lower it back down, and then you can use a breaker bar and take it off that way and then jack it back up. But since I have an impact, we're just going to take it off with the impact. As you can see, when it's folded in, it doesn't allow the nut to spin off, so you kind of have to. So in going back together, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to put it back on, then we're going to take our punch, and we're just going to nail it back down to that keyway. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off these bolts that hold on the spindle. So as you can tell, it's already marked from when I did the coilovers on the car. This top bolt is a camber bolt, and that's going to take your front wheel and it's going to pitch it either out or in. I'll show you when we get it off, but you want to make sure that you mark right there and then on the bolt itself, so when you go back together you put it in the same exact spot that you took it off. That's kind of what I was talking about. It's got a little bump right there, and that's going to change the pitch of how that sits just by how it rolls. So that's why you want to make sure to mark that and put it back exactly the way it was. The bottom one's totally fine. You can just take it off. So now what we're going to do is we're going to push this away from that like that. Just kind of push the coil over your strut back. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to get a punch, and then we're going to preferably hit it in that spot right there so we don't mess anything up. We're going to push the CV axle back a little bit. Now there's only so far you can really hit it, and then you can also, I mean, if it's really giving you fits, you can, you know, take off this right here, your tie rod end, to kind of give you more play. But I've been able to move it enough and move the steering enough just to slip it out. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to move the steering and try and slide it out by hand. Alright, so what we ended up having to do is I had to have my friend push down on this, and we also turned the steering wheel as far to the right as we could, and then as he pushed down on this, I took the CV axle and was able to slide it out of place. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go underneath the car and we're going to cut off the bands that go to the inside boot so we can get to the snap ring, so then we can pull the CV axle out to slide this boot, the new boot, on. Okay, so here's the inside of the CV axle. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut off that band and then that band. I didn't mention it before, but you're probably going to end up needing 2 extra bands so you can put that back on. And the bands, be careful if you're going to reuse this inner CV boot that you don't cut into the rubber itself, otherwise you're going to need a new inner boot as well. I just used some side cutters and cut those bands off. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to slide the boot back to reveal the bull ring that's holding the CV axle in. Okay, I don't know how well you can see that, but I got the boot pulled back, and right here right there is the clip that's holding the CV axle in. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull that little clip out. Alright, so I got a little pick right here, and I'm just going to go like that. I'm just kind of pop this ring out. It's kind of tricky because got grease all over. Just like that. So there's our ring. So now that we got this ring out, now you should just be able to grab your CV shaft and pull it out. You might lose a roller bearing, which looks like I lost one, which is fine, it just slides back on. Yeah, that's what the inside one looks like. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get our brake clean, some gloves, and we're going to clean both ends up. This is the messiest part, but I'm just going to brake clean this off a little bit. I pulled the roller bearings off. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Makes it easier to work with. And for the bearings, I'm just going to do those without brake clean. Just going to clean them off. And then when you're done with those, I mean, they just slide back on, just like that. So what we're going to do next, after you got it somewhat clean, is you've got a snap ring up at the top. So we're going to remove that snap ring. Okay, now once you remove that snap ring, this piece comes off, It doesn't matter the orientation, so you can just slide it off and clean it up, and then when you're ready to go back on, you can just slide it back on. So now we can finally take off our inner boot here, which is, in this case, it's still good, so we're going to reuse it and just put different clamps on it. So we got that off, and then we can go to our problematic boot, which, as you can tell right there, it's got a little cut, and that's what was spraying grease everywhere. So I already cut these bands off. Just gonna pull that out and slide it out of the whole shaft, and then slide our new one back on. Alright, as soon as you got all of this stuff cleaned up and you got your boot slid off, it's always a good idea to take your boot that you're replacing and match it up with the new one that you got, just to make sure everything's okay. This one's a little bit stretched out, but as you can tell, I mean, it'll be the same thing once we get it on. So I left a little bit of grease down in there still. I just cleaned up the shaft, cleaned up the bearings and everything else. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to slide our new inner or outer boot on, and then we're going to load it full of some grease. Slide it on like that. Okay. So we're just going to grab some scissors, cut a little corner off your grease packet. I'm just going to load it up in here. I'm not going to use the whole thing because, I mean, there's still some that I left in the bottom there. So I'm going to slide it forward then and go around this. Now you might need a pick or something to kind of help you around the corner. Alright, so now I got it slid over where it needs to be. I'm going to take my ring, and this is where that special tool comes in. So what you're going to do is, this has little barbs on it, and you can adjust how tight you want it from there. But then to do the final tightening, what you do is you get a tool like this, and what it does is it goes in here and it squeezes and crimps it tight. Now these I got off of the Snap-on truck. I think they're like $30 or $40, not much. I'm sure you could get them at Harbor Freight or anywhere else like that. So we're gonna slide it over. Oh, it looks like I'm gonna have to adjust it. So I'm gonna unclip it. Go around, get it as tight as I can. Find a slot that works the best, the tightest. So right there is pretty good. Make sure it's where you want it, because as soon as you snug it down, it's on there. I'm gonna double check. So now I'm going to grab it right here. Squeeze it. And as you can tell, that crimped it into place, and now it's really tight. It's not coming off. So now all we got to do is slide this over that hump and then put the smaller one on. Okay, so before you slide this back up and over this, you want to put all of this stuff back together. Slide that back on, put your snap ring back on, your bearings back on. They're going to want to fall out, so as you're going back in, you're going to want to hold them. But we're also going to load this full of grease. Okay, now we got this cup loaded full of grease. We're going to put the bearings back on. We're going to shove it in there, put that bull ring, that retainer clip back on to hold this in place, and then we'll put our other clamp up and over this, and we should be done. Alright, now that we got that side in, the inside's now done. So we just slid it back in, brought the boot back so you could see your retainer clip, put the retainer clip back in, slid the boot back over the cover, and then put the clamp on the front and then on the back. And so now it's locked in there. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to have my friend again push down on this, and I'm just going to slide this back into place. Alright, so now we got that back in place. We're just going to push this back and then bring those splines back through here. just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn the wheel back so we can line this back up with the coilover or strut. With that done, straighten back up, we're just going to go back together the way we took it apart. So we're going to put this back together like that. Sometimes you'll have to get like a jack or something to help lift it up to line those bolts up. I'm going to put this bottom bolt in first. Remember, it doesn't matter where that one goes. So we're going to put in our camber bolt and make sure to put that back in just the way you took it out so your lines match up. Just going to spin it a little bit, just a little bit off. Okay, now I'm going to tighten it up, making sure not to spin it. I'm going to tighten up the bottom one. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put this nut back on. Get it started there. Grab our 32. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my punch like we talked about, and I'm just going to hit this back up into that keyway. Just like that. Now we're going to clean off the inside of the wheel and throw it back on. Should be ready to go. Alright, now that we got it pretty well clean enough for now, but just throw the wheel back on and torque everything down to spec, and that's it. That's how you do an outer CV boot.